My parents ignored my wedding. But when they saw my $145,000 Porsche on Instagram, Mom called. "We need to talk. Family meeting tomorrow." I showed up with a surprise. Imagine this. My own parents, the people who were supposed to be my foundation, skipped my wedding, for a Mediterranean cruise they'd never even mentioned. But the second I posted a picture of my new Porsche on Instagram, suddenly, I was their beloved son, and they needed a family meeting. What happened when I walked into their house that day wasn't just about money. It was an epic showdown over what family truly means, and I brought a different kind of currency to the table. Hey everyone, I'm Kurt, and if you've ever felt like you were invisible to the people who should see you most, this story is for you. Before I dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. You won't believe how this all played out. Growing up in Wellesley, this picture-perfect Boston suburb, our colonial house with its manicured lawn was the ultimate trophy for my parents, Thomas and Margaret Wilson. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. My dad, an investment banker, pulled 80-hour weeks downtown, while my mom, Margaret, was relentlessly climbing the social ladder, obsessed with appearances. I learned early that in our house, appearances were everything. My dad was rarely home, and when he was, it was all phone calls and business. Mom was physically present, but her mind was miles away, cataloging neighborhood status or planning her next big charity event. Neither of them seemed to care about me beyond making sure I didn't embarrass them. My older siblings, Stephanie and James, they were different. Stephanie, 6 years my senior, was Mom's pride and joy, beautiful, social, headed for an Ivy League. James, 4 years older, was Dad's investment, athletic, charismatic, destined for finance. And then there was me, the afterthought child. I was quiet, fascinated by how things worked, not how they looked. Computers became my escape around age 8, when Dad brought home an old desktop from his office. That machine, obsolete to them, opened up an entire universe for me. I'd spend hours devouring programming books from the library while my parents were at galas and my siblings collected accolades. One memory still cuts deep. My 10th birthday. It landed on the same day as some exclusive country club event my parents had spent years networking to get into. "We'll celebrate this weekend," Mom promised, applying her makeup without even looking at me. That weekend came and went without a single mention of my birthday. When I quietly reminded them Sunday night, Mom looked genuinely surprised. The next morning, she slid a crumpled $50 under my napkin. "Get yourself something nice," she said, before diving back into her social calendar. It wasn't just a birthday, it was a punch to the gut. By 13, I'd built my first rudimentary game. My computer science teacher actually noticed. When I showed my parents, Dad just glanced up from his financial papers. "Computers are a good hobby, Kurt, but don't get distracted from real academics." Mom just nodded, already more focused on Stephanie's college applications. High school brought academic success in science and math, which they acknowledged with mild approval at best. They were at every single one of James's football games, every one of Stephanie's debate competitions. But my tech competitions? They always had an excuse. The time my coding team won the state championship, I called home, absolutely buzzing. "That's nice, Kurt," Mom said. "Did you remember to pick up your father's dry cleaning on your way home?" It was always the same. Physical needs met, emotional presence absent. I had a roof, food, clothes, education. In their minds, their job was done. Anything beyond that, validation, encouragement, genuine interest, seemed like luxuries they couldn't afford, despite all their money. By 17, I'd stopped expecting them to show up, literally or figuratively. While they talked about James's business school prospects over dinner, I quietly applied for scholarships. While they framed Stephanie's Harvard acceptance letter, I researched computer science programs and coding internships. I built a shell of self-reliance around myself. I was determined to succeed, not for their approval, but to build a life where their approval simply didn't matter. The night before I left for college, sitting alone on our back porch, I made myself a promise. I would build something meaningful on my own terms. I would create success that didn't require their validation. And most importantly, I would become the kind of person who shows up for the people who matter to me. What I didn't know then was just how thoroughly I'd keep that promise, or how, ironically, their sudden interest would only arrive once I had completely stopped seeking it. MIT's acceptance letter, with a substantial scholarship attached, arrived on a rainy April afternoon. It meant I could go without a dime from my parents, and that mattered deeply to my pride. When I announced the news at dinner, Mom said, "That's nice, though Harvard would have been better for connections," before asking James about his summer internship. Dad just nodded, muttering that those computer people sometimes make decent money if they land at the right companies. Moving to Cambridge felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 18 years. My dorm was chaotic, cramped, but filled with minds buzzing with ideas. For the first time, my passion wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. I found my people, other students who'd stay up until 3 a.m. debating algorithms, dreaming of changing the world with code. During orientation, I met Ryan Foster. He grew up in Seattle with parents at Microsoft, but he wanted his own path. I was methodical. Ryan was visionary. He could translate complex tech into something exciting for anyone. We became inseparable, pulling all-nighters, pushing each other to think bigger. By sophomore year, we built our first successful app, a simple file-sharing platform that blew up on campus. When it hit 10,000 users, I called home, hoping they'd finally grasp what I was doing. "That's an impressive number," Dad said, distracted. "But what's the monetization strategy?" He cut me off for a work call before I could explain. Mom asked if an app was like a website, then changed the subject to Stephanie's engagement. Crushing, but expected. Junior year, I got hooked on cybersecurity. While others chased consumer apps, I became obsessed with protecting digital infrastructure. Ryan and I started developing security protocols to fix vulnerabilities we saw everywhere. Our professors took notice, connecting us to industry contacts. Senior year, at a tech conference, Ryan introduced me to Eliza Taylor. She was a brilliant cybersecurity analyst, with dark curly hair, intense brown eyes, and a mind that could dismantle complex problems with elegant efficiency. When she challenged my assertion about encryption protocols, I was instantly intimidated and completely captivated. Our first date, in a hole-in-the-wall coffee shop, lasted 6 hours. Eliza understood my passion like no one else, not even Ryan. More importantly, she listened, truly listened. She made me feel seen in a way my family never had. Graduation came with job offers from big tech companies. My parents showed up, sitting stiffly. "A computer science degree is certainly practical these days," Dad commented, like I'd chosen a sensible appliance, not pursued my passion. Mom asked when I'd get a real apartment, now that I was earning actual money. But Ryan and we had a different plan. We turned down those corporate offers. Terrifying, I know. We launched our own cybersecurity firm. Eliza supported us completely, even though it meant ramen dinners and brutal hours. Those early startup days tested everything: my skills, my resilience, my relationship with Eliza. We pitched countless companies who didn't even understand why they needed us. Ryan's charisma opened doors. My innovations kept them open. Eliza was my rock. She'd bring dinner at midnight, offer crucial feedback. When we got rejected by the 7th client in a month, she helped me redesign our entire approach. When I doubted, she reminded me of our vision. 18 months in, we landed our first major client, a financial services firm hit by a massive data breach. Our solution didn't just fix it, it prevented future vulnerabilities. Word spread. Within invitation samples, Mom said they looked very nice, no preference. I called to ask if they'd meet Eliza's parents. They cited scheduling difficulties. 6 months into planning, I started to accept what Eliza had gently tried to prepare me for. My parents had no intention of meaningfully engaging. They'd respond to direct questions, but never initiated, never expressed interest. Most tellingly, they never once asked, "How can we help?" or "What would make this day special for you?" 8 weeks before the wedding, I made one last, desperate attempt. I called on a Sunday, knowing they'd be home. "I wanted to confirm you'll be at the wedding," I said, trying to sound casual. "We need to finalize seating and headcount." A brief silence. Then Mom's voice, bright and cheerful. "Oh, Kurt, I meant to call you. Your father and I have booked that Mediterranean cruise we've been talking about for years. The dates conflict with your wedding weekend." The cruise they'd never once mentioned. The cruise that just happened to fall on the weekend of their only son's wedding. "I see," I managed to say. "That's unfortunate timing. These premium packages book up so quickly," she chirped. "And you know how difficult it is for your father to take time away from work. When this opportunity came up, we really couldn't pass it up." Dad got on the extension. We'll send a nice gift, of course. I'm sure the day will be wonderful. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of heartbreak and absolute clarity. Eliza found me sitting silently in our apartment. She knew instantly. She held me while I finally let go of the last remnants of that childish hope that I would someday matter enough for them to show up. Family is who shows up, she whispered, wiping my tears. And you have family who will be there, Kurt. Real family. She was right. Ryan was my best man, proud and protective. His parents helped with vendors, insisted on hosting the rehearsal dinner. Eliza's large, boisterous family embraced me completely. Her father called regularly just to check on me. My team at work threw a surprise bachelor weekend that made me feel more valued than any interaction I'd ever had with my blood relatives. Our wedding day was warm and sunny. Standing in the getting ready room, I saw fathers helping sons with bow ties. A pang. Ryan noticed, squeezed my shoulder. Their loss today, brother, he said simply. Their tremendous loss. When it was time to walk down the aisle, I had asked Eliza's father if he would escort me too. This kind man, who had shown me more paternal interest in 5 years than my own father had in 30, didn't hesitate. He stood proudly between Eliza and me, a hand on each of our shoulders, walking us both toward our future. The ceremony was everything, intimate, meaningful, surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated our union. Ryan's toast brought tears to my eyes. Family isn't just blood, he said, raising his glass. Family is who sees you at your worst and still shows up at your best. Family is who celebrates your victories as their own. Kurt, you have built your family through the strength of your character and the generosity of your heart. I am proud to stand here as your brother in everything but name. Later, swaying on the dance floor with Eliza, surrounded by real love, I realized I had finally stopped looking over my shoulder for approval that would never come. The absence of my parents no longer felt like a void, but like space cleared for something better. In the months after our wedding, they sent a crystal vase and a generic card. I called to thank them. Mom chatted about Mediterranean ports, never once asking about our honeymoon or the wedding itself. After that, contact dwindled to holiday texts and occasional emails. I had finally accepted the family I had, rather than longing for the one I'd never have. What I couldn't anticipate, though, was how their interest would suddenly reactivate when money entered the equation. 2 years after our wedding, Ryan and my company was experiencing explosive growth. Our proprietary security protocol caught the eye of major players after we helped a mid-sized bank prevent a catastrophic data breach. When the story hit industry news, our phones exploded. The breakthrough came with Meridian Financial Group, a Fortune 500 company. Their contract was worth more than all our previous work combined. The night we signed, Ryan and I just sat there, stunned, then erupted into hysterical laughter. We actually did it, Ryan kept saying. We did, I confirmed, thinking of all those all-nighters, all those rejections, all the times we almost quit. Within 6 months, our company valuation hit $50 million. We moved to a huge office in downtown Boston. Our team grew from 30 to 75. Industry publications featured us. Competitors tried to poach our talent. Despite this success, Eliza and I lived pretty modestly. A comfortable condo, Friday night takeout, movie marathons. We reinvested most of our earnings, saving for the future. Our one splurge, 2 weeks of travel each year. Then, one evening over dinner, Eliza shared news that changed everything. She was pregnant. After the initial shock, overwhelming joy took its place. As we talked late into the night about becoming parents, I reflected on my own childhood. I made a silent promise to our unborn child. I will see you, I whispered, my hand on Eliza's still flat stomach. I will show up for every moment that matters, and even the ones that don't. This impending shift made me reflective. For years, I'd focused on building the company, our marriage, proving something to myself. Now, with a child on the way, that chapter felt complete. Maybe that's why, when Ryan suggested I finally buy something just for myself, the idea resonated differently. You've earned it, he insisted. Not just financially, but you've earned the right to enjoy the results of your work. After weeks of research, I settled on a Porsche 911 Turbo S in classic silver. The $145,000 price tag was a fraction of my net worth, but it was still the largest purely personal purchase I'd ever made. Eliza supported it completely. You've been so focused on building security for us, for our future, she said, rubbing her slightly rounded belly. Enjoying one beautiful thing that brings you pleasure doesn't change who you are. Picking up the car was surreal. Sitting in that driver's seat felt extravagant and perfectly right. A tangible manifestation of a journey that began in that tiny MIT dorm room with Ryan and a stack of coding books. On impulse, I stopped at a scenic overlook. The afternoon sun cast a perfect glow on the silver paint. I rarely posted on social media, maybe once every few months, but something compelled me to take a photo. Me, leaning against the car, the Boston skyline in the background. I added a simple caption. Some dreams take longer than others. Grateful for the journey and everyone who made it possible. I tagged Eliza and Ryan, put my phone away, and enjoyed the powerful drive home. I thought nothing more about the post until later that evening when notifications started flooding my phone. Friends, colleagues, former classmates, all congratulations. I scrolled casually until one stopped my heart. Margaret Wilson had commented, "Beautiful car, Kurt. You've done well for yourself." Minutes later, my mother's number, a number that hadn't appeared on my screen in over 8 months, lit up my phone. "Kurt," she said when I answered, her voice carrying that familiar, controlled pleasantness. "Your father and I were just talking about you." Really? I couldn't keep the skepticism out of my voice. "Yes, we saw your post. The car is lovely. European engineering is so superior, isn't it? Your father always said you were smart with technology matters." The backhanded compliment was so typical, I almost laughed. Before I could respond, she continued, "We think it's time we had a family meeting. Tomorrow would be best. Could you come to the house around 11 o'clock? The abruptness, after such prolonged silence, was jarring. A family meeting about what? "Family matters," she replied vaguely. "It's best discussed in person. You'll be there." I found myself agreeing before fully processing it. After hanging up, I stood there, phone in hand, trying to understand the strange feeling in my chest, a mixture of that old childhood hope and adult weariness. Eliza looked up from her book, sensing my discomfort. "What is it?" My mother called. They want a vent, not the innocent act it had been the day before. Each mile brought a flood of memories, driving home from events they'd missed, returning from college to a house that never felt like home. The last visit, when I'd invited them to my wedding. I rehearsed what I wanted to say, focusing on maintaining emotional equilibrium. This meeting wasn't about convincing them to be different or making them understand their impact on my life. It was about standing firmly in my own truth. The night before, Eliza had helped me prepare a document, not the one they would be expecting, but one that represented what I truly wanted to contribute to our family's legacy. I had it in a simple envelope in my jacket pocket. Approaching their neighborhood, my stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. I pulled over a block away, turned off the engine, and closed my eyes. I thought about Eliza and our child, about the kind of father I was determined to be, about Ryan and our team, about Eliza's parents, who called weekly, about the family I had built through choice, not blood. Taking a deep breath, I restarted the engine and drove the final distance. As I pulled into the driveway, I caught movement at the living room window, my mother, watching my arrival in the car that had suddenly made me worthy of a family meeting. For the first time in my adult life, I walked toward their front door feeling neither hope for their approval nor fear of their indifference. I was simply Kurt Wilson, exactly as I was, finally comfortable in that identity, regardless of how they saw me. The interior of their house hit me with unexpected sensory familiarity, the subtle scent of Mom's lemon furniture polish, the slightly too cool air conditioning, the ticking of the grandfather clock. It was like the house existed in a time capsule, while my life had transformed completely outside its walls. "Kurt," my mother greeted me in the foyer, her eyes quickly moving past my face to peer through the window at the Porsche. "Right on time. Your father is in the living room." She was dressed as if for a country club luncheon, not a family meeting. Tailored slacks, silk blouse, pearls, her perfect ash blonde hair. I followed her to the living room where my father stood to shake my hand, formally, like a business associate. "You're looking well," he said, giving me a once-over. "Success agrees with you." "Thank you," I replied simply, taking a seat in what had always been my chair during family discussions, a slightly uncomfortable armchair, positioned so both parents could easily observe my reactions. Mom poured coffee from a silver service. Important conversations in this house always happened over coffee in the good china. The car is certainly impressive, she began, handing me a cup I didn't want. European engineering really is exceptional. It drives beautifully, I acknowledged, determined not to play the game of pretending this meeting was about catching up. I read about your company in the Boston Business Journal. My father interjected. Security software for financial institutions. Smart sector. Consistent demand, clients with deep pockets. We've worked hard to build something valuable, I said, intentionally using we to acknowledge Ryan, something my father consistently overlooked. Hard work and lucky timing, he commented. You got into cybersecurity just as it was becoming a priority. Good instincts there. The familiar diminishment, attributing my success more to luck than skill, might have stung years ago. Now, it just confirmed what this meeting was really about. I'm curious, I said, placing my untouched coffee on the side table. What prompted this family meeting after nearly 2 years of minimal contact? My parents exchanged a glance I recognized from childhood, the look they shared when navigating a social situation requiring a coordinated response. My mother smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her slacks. Well, we've been meaning to reconnect, she began, her voice carrying that practiced warmth she used with casual acquaintances. When we saw how well you're doing, it seemed like a good time. A good time, I repeated, neutrally. My father cleared his throat. The truth is, Kurt, we have a family situation that requires discussion. As you know, investment banking has changed significantly. Some ventures that seemed secure have proven otherwise. I waited, already anticipating where this was heading. Your father made some investments that haven't performed as expected, my mother explained delicately. Significant investments. The market can be unpredictable, I offered, giving them the opening they clearly wanted. My father nodded gravely. We're facing some financial adjustments. Nothing catastrophic, but the house carries a second mortgage that's becoming challenging to maintain. I see, I said, maintaining a neutral expression. And you thought I might help with this situation. Your family, my mother said, as though that simple fact explained and justified everything. Family supports each other through difficult times. The irony of this statement hung in the air like a thick fog. I let the silence stretch uncomfortably. Family supports each other, I echoed, like attending important life events? Wedding ceremonies, perhaps? My mother's expression tightened. That Mediterranean cruise was booked well in advance, Kurt. These things happen with scheduling. Things happen, I agreed mildly. Like suddenly remembering you have a son when you see evidence he might be in a position to help you financially. My father's face flushed. That's unfair. We've always been supportive of your computer interests. Have you? I asked, genuinely curious if they believed this. Can you name what my company actually does? Have you ever asked about my work beyond its profit potential? An uncomfortable silence followed before my mother changed tactics. We saw on social media that Eliza is expecting our first grandchild. That's wonderful news. This pivot to my pregnancy news. Information they'd clearly gleaned from social media, not from me directly, confirmed everything. They were cataloging my assets, successful company, expensive car, impending family expansion. All potential leverage points. Yes, we're very excited, I replied, offering nothing more. A grandchild changes everything, my mother continued. Family becomes even more important. We should be coming together, especially now. Coming together, I repeated thoughtfully. I agree that family is important. That's actually why I came today. My parents exchanged another glance, this one carrying visible relief. They thought I was acquiescing. We knew you'd understand, my father said. Just a temporary situation until some investments mature. 100,000 would bridge the gap nicely. Of course, we'd structure it properly. Loan documents, interest. The naked request confirmed every suspicion. No pretense of reconnecting emotionally. No acknowledgement of past absences or hurts. Just a transaction between people who happened to share DNA. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew the envelope. Both their eyes fixed on it with barely disguised eagerness. I brought something I wanted to share with you, I said, holding the envelope without immediately handing it over. A decision I've made about family and legacy. My mother smiled. That's very thoughtful, Kurt. I placed the envelope on the coffee table. Before you open this, I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to buy a relationship with you. Whatever is in our past remains there. What matters to me now is going forward with clarity and honesty. My father reached for the envelope with the confident movement of someone accustomed to getting what he wants. As he opened it and scanned the contents, his expression shifted from anticipation to confusion. "What is this?" he asked, handing the document to my mother. "It's the establishment document for the Wilson Family Foundation," I explained calmly. "I've endowed it with $1 million as a starting point." My mother looked up sharply. "A foundation? We don't need charity, Kurt. We need practical assistance with our financial situation." "The foundation isn't for you," I clarified. "It's dedicated to supporting children and young adults who experience emotional neglect within families of financial privilege. It will fund counseling services, mentorship programs, and educational opportunities." The silence that followed was profound. My father's face reddened further, while my mother's paled. "This is your response to our situation?" my father finally managed. "Creating some charity instead of helping your own family?" "This is my response to our entire family history," I corrected gently. "I'm creating some had when I arrived." The image struck me as an apt metaphor for how perspective changes when we stop magnifying others' power over our self-worth. The drive home from my parents' house felt completely different. Where anxiety had accompanied me to Wellesley, a profound sense of peace followed me back to Cambridge. The weight of unresolved expectations and unacknowledged hurts had lifted, replaced by the clarity of honest communication and established boundaries. When I walked into our condo, Eliza was waiting, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "How did it go?" she asked, meeting me at the door. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling our baby's small bump between us. "Exactly as expected," I replied. "They needed money. I gave them boundaries instead." We settled on the couch, and I recounted the entire conversation. When I described presenting the foundation documents instead of a check, Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You transformed something painful into something healing," she said. "That's who you are, Kurt. That's why I love you." The emotional release I'd been holding back finally surfaced in our living room, surrounded by photos of our chosen family: Ryan and his parents, Eliza's large clan, our team at milestone celebrations. I finally grieved fully for the relationship with my parents I'd never had, and now understood I never would. "I'm not angry anymore," I realized, wiping my eyes. "I'm just free." Eliza nodded. "Freedom comes when you stop expecting people to be who they can't be and start accepting who they actually are." That evening, I called Ryan. His immediate response was protective rage on my behalf, followed by profound appreciation for the foundation concept. "You're breaking the cycle," he said, "not just personally, but potentially for hundreds of kids who might get support that changes their trajectory." The foundation became a meaningful focus over the coming months. We assembled a board of directors that included therapists specializing in family dynamics, educators who worked with high-achieving students from emotionally distant homes, and adults who had navigated similar childhood experiences to mine. The Wilson Family Foundation established its mission to recognize and address the invisible wounds of emotional neglect in environments of material plenty. My parents didn't contact me for 6 weeks. When they did, it was my father who called, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "We've listed the house," he said, without preamble. "The market is strong enough that we should clear the mortgages and have enough to purchase something more appropriate for retirement." "That sounds like a sensible plan," I replied neutrally. A pause. Then he continued, "Your mother and I have discussed your foundation. We'd like to know more about it." I explained the mission and programs, keeping my expectations measured. Another long pause followed. "It's addressing something real," he finally acknowledged. "Something we perhaps didn't understand." It wasn't an apology or a direct acknowledgement of our family dynamics, but it was possibly the most honest statement my father had ever made about emotional matters. I accepted it as the beginning of a different kind of conversation. Over the subsequent months, my parents did downsize. My mother even attended one foundation board meeting as an observer, saying little but listening attentively to personal testimonials from young adults who had benefited from similar programs. Our relationship didn't transform into the close family bond you see in movies. No tearful reconciliations, no sudden deep conversations about the past. Instead, we established a measured connection based on clearly defined boundaries and modest expectations. They asked about the pregnancy with what seemed like genuine interest, When Eliza and I learned we were having a daughter, my mother sent a handmade baby blanket, with a note mentioning it was similar to one she had made for me before I was born. It was a small gesture, but it carried significance precisely because it wasn't accompanied by requests or conditions. 6 months after the family meeting, our daughter Catherine was born. My parents visited the hospital briefly, bringing a tasteful gift and interacting with appropriate grandparent enthusiasm. When they held her, I saw something in their expressions I recognized from my own first moments holding her, a mixture of awe and terror at the responsibility of nurturing another human being. Perhaps they had felt that with me too, I realized, but lacked the emotional tools or models to translate that feeling into consistent presence. Understanding this didn't erase the past, but it helped me view them with more compassion, as people with their own limitations, rather than as deliberate architects of my pain. The true healing, however, came through my daily choices with Catherine. Each time I put aside work to fully engage with her. Each time I responded to her cries without hesitation. Each time I marveled at her smallest developments. I was actively creating the childhood experience I wished for her, rather than replicating the one I had known. One Wednesday afternoon, about a year after Catherine's birth, I faced a critical decision. Our company was preparing for an important client presentation the next morning. Last-minute issues had emerged, the kind that would typically keep me at the office late into the evening. Simultaneously, Catherine was taking her first tentative steps, a milestone Eliza had excitedly texted me about. Without hesitation, I delegated the presentation preparations to our capable team and drove home by 5 p.m. I arrived in time to witness Catherine's wobbly journey from coffee table to couch. The pure joy on her face when she saw me watching made every professional accomplishment pale in comparison. That evening, as I rocked her to sleep, I whispered the truth that had become my guiding principle. Success isn't measured by what you accumulate or achieve. It's measured by whether you show up for the people who matter, consistently and without condition. The wealth I had built provided security and opportunity. But the real treasure was the freedom to prioritize presence over acquisition, connection over status, and authenticity over appearance. My parents had chosen a different path, one that ultimately cost them the deepest joys of genuine relationship. The foundation continued to grow, eventually establishing scholarship programs, therapy services, and mentorship networks across New England. My parents' involvement remained peripheral but respectful, perhaps the most authentic engagement they were capable of offering. Ryan and I eventually sold our company for a figure that ensured financial security for generations. The day after the sale finalized, we both agreed the most meaningful outcome wasn't the money, but the community we had built and the problems we had solved together. Looking back on my journey from emotionally neglected child to emotionally present father, I realized the greatest gift my parents inadvertently gave me was the opportunity to define family on my own terms. Not as a biological obligation, but as a sacred commitment to genuine presence and unconditional support. The Porsche still sits in our garage, driven occasionally for pleasure, not status. It represents not just success, but the pivotal moment when I finally stopped seeking approval and started enforcing boundaries. Sometimes, the most valuable things money can buy aren't possessions, but the clarity that comes from recognizing when relationships are conditional. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with your own experience, remember this. Your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it. Family is ultimately defined by consistent presence, not by blood or obligation. The cycles of emotional neglect can be broken when we choose to be the people we needed when we were younger. Thanks for staying with me through this story. If it touched you in some way, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. I'd love to know in the comments, what boundaries have you established that helped you build healthier relationships? How have you transformed painful experiences into growth? Your story matters, too, and this community is here to listen. Until next time, remember that showing up consistently and authentically is the greatest gift you can give to those you love.